Have you ever imagined receiving news that shatters everything you believe, only to realize a few hours later that it might not be the end of the story? It was supposed to be just another ordinary day. The house was silent, the clock ticked with cruel slowness, and a mother's heart pounded faster, as if sensing something nameless was about to happen. Then the door opened. Uniforms. Solemn faces. Cold, rehearsed words, delivered without emotion. Her son, a soldier deployed on a mission, had been officially declared dead. No body. No farewell. Just an announcement that stole the breath from her lungs. The silence that followed was deafening. There was no scream. No immediate despair. Only that deep emptiness that takes hold when the mind refuses to accept what it just heard. If you've ever lost someone this way, you know. It's as if the world keeps turning, but you remain frozen in time. Have you ever experienced that feeling, that something simply doesn't make sense, even when everyone insists it's over? War does this. It doesn't just take lives on the battlefield, it steals pieces of the families left behind. Mothers who learn to sleep with the phone beside them. Fathers who pray in silence. Soldiers who leave carrying dreams, promises, and the hope of returning. Stories about soldiers who come back from war often speak of courage, but few mention what happens when the news of death arrives before the truth does. In that house, everything pointed to the end. Official documents. Military reports. Authorities confirming what no one wanted to hear. To the world, that soldier had become just another name on a list. But to a mother, that bond wasn't severed by words. Something inside her resisted, an odd tightness in her chest, an uneasy feeling that the story was incomplete. As night fell, grief began to settle in, the kind of sorrow that makes no sound but weighs like tons. Her mind replayed the last memories, the final hug, the last "take care," the last smile before he left. How many moving stories begin exactly like this, with a goodbye that seemed final? But it's in darkness that certain things happen. When the world grows quiet. When exhaustion overtakes the body. When the soul, weakened by pain, opens to something beyond what the eyes can see. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might astonish you. That same night, as tears finally gave way to exhaustion, that mother fell asleep. And there, between sleep and sorrow, something inexplicable happened. A dream, not an ordinary one, not a confused one, but a dream so vivid it couldn't be ignored. A dream that brought no farewell, but a message. Not death, but presence. As if the unseen itself had chosen to intervene. Many would call it coincidence. Others would say it's just the brain coping with trauma. But those who've experienced spiritual signs know. There are moments that can't be explained, only felt. And sometimes, those moments change everything. Soldiers who return from war often carry scars on their bodies and souls. Some return by paths no one expected. Others come back because someone, somewhere, refused to accept the end. This isn't just a story about war. It's about faith, spiritual connection, and a love that crosses even the boundary between life and death. And as that night deepened, something began to stir, silently, far from the world's gaze, preparing a revelation no one could foresee. Perhaps that's exactly why stories like this can't remain untold. Because as you listen, something inside you might awaken, a buried memory, an old wound, or even that strange feeling you've lived something similar but could never put into words. If this resonates with you, leave a comment below sharing what touched you most so far. Sometimes, writing is the most sincere way to soothe what's been locked away in your heart. There are experiences that only make sense when shared. People who felt spiritual signs, intense dreams, impossible premonitions. When one person comments, another recognizes themselves. That's how this community grows, one story leading to another, one testimony giving strength to the next. Your participation here is what keeps this channel delivering moving stories like this to those who need to hear them. If, at any moment during this account, you felt a shiver, a pause in your thoughts, or that inexplicable inner silence, please consider liking this video. That simple gesture helps this message reach more people who carry unanswered questions, unresolved grief, or the hope that not everything ends when it seems to. And if you feel stories like this deserve to be told, If accounts of transformed lives, soldiers who return from war, and signs that defy logic should keep being shared, then please subscribe to the channel. Every subscription is like a signal that this message must keep moving forward, crossing screens, nights, and attentive hearts. Because what began with devastating news is far from over. And from here on, every detail of that night, every step this mother took, and every sign that followed, will begin to reveal something far greater than anyone imagined. Now, I want to go even deeper, because long before any battle existed, long before any uniform was worn, there was a son. An ordinary young man with simple dreams and a heart full of plans that hadn't yet been tested by the weight of war. This soldier wasn't born a hero. He was born in a home where the smell of coffee mixed with kitchen table conversations, where his mother's voice was a refuge, and where the future seemed distant but possible. He grew up learning that life demanded choices, some easy, others far less so. From early on, he carried a sense of responsibility, a quiet desire to be someone who makes a difference, not for glory or medals, but from an inner sense of purpose. People like this often feel they must go beyond comfort, as if something inside tells them standing still isn't an option. When the decision to enlist came, it wasn't born from an empty impulse. It followed many conversations, sleepless nights, and thoughts he never fully voiced. To his mother, that choice felt like a mix of pride and fear. Pride in seeing her son choose courage, fear knowing some journeys exact too high a price. Still, she supported him. Because mothers sense when they must let go, even with their hearts clenched tight. Before the war, he spoke of the future. He talked about returning. He dreamed of building something once it was all over. He made simple promises, yet deeply meaningful ones, to call whenever he could, to take care of himself, to make sure this wasn't a final goodbye. And perhaps the strongest promise was the one spoken without words, during their last embrace, when time seemed to slow down just for the two of them. That final hug wasn't ordinary. It was long, silent, filled with everything they couldn't say. The kind of hug that stays etched in memory, as both a warning and an anchor. She felt it. He felt it. But neither dared translate that premonition into words. Sometimes, love expresses itself precisely through silence. That day, the soldier walked out the door carrying a backpack and a lifetime of expectations. He didn't know what lay ahead, but believed he was ready. And in a way, he was. He had values, discipline, faith. Even if it was a quiet faith, tucked away in the corners of his mind. But war doesn't test only the body. It confronts the hidden truth each person carries about themselves. Far from home, amid drills and deployments, he began to grasp the real weight of his decisions. Have you ever imagined receiving from news life that shatters everything you believe, pushed him toward only a transformation to realize a few hours later that it might not be the end of the story? It was supposed to be just another ordinary day. That this journey held layers beyond what the eyes could see. Cruel slowness. Meanwhile, and his mother kept up appearances, as if sensing something nameless was about to happen. She woke early, then kept the house in order, replied to messages with smiles that weren't always real. Cold, she followed the news obsessively, as if searching for hidden signs. Her son, a soldier deployed on a mission, realizing had been officially she was already being prepared for something that would shift her entire worldview. The soldier, for his part, stole the breath from her lungs whenever possible. The silence that followed was brief calls, always downplaying the risks. No immediate despair. He said everything was fine. Only another phase emptiness that takes hold when the mind refuses to accept. But there were moments when his voice faltered. When the silence ever lost someone this way, spoke louder than any report. It's as if the world keeps turning, but you remain frozen in time. To hide your feelings. Have you ever experienced that feeling? That something simply doesn't make sense. His surroundings grew even tenser. When everyone insists what once felt over. Like distant training now took on real contours. It doesn't just take lives on the battlefield. Had to it be steals pieces of the families left behind. The line between safety mothers and danger who learned to sleep with the phone beside yet them. He pressed on. Fathers perhaps because he believed this experience held a greater purpose, who leave carrying because dreams, deep down, promises, he sensed he wasn't there by returning. Stories about soldiers who come back from war often speak of courage. Before tragedy, before grief, when the news of death arrives, before the sequence of choices in that house and expectations that lend weight to what follows. Official documents, without understanding who he was before the war, it's impossible to grasp the true impact no one wanted to hear next to the world. Because when that information had become just another name on official. It didn't just erase a soldier. That bond wasn't threatened to erase all those memories, something inside all those dreams, and all those softly spoken promises, an uneasy feeling that the story was incomplete. This mother's reaction as night fell, ordinary. Grief began to settle something inside her, the kind of sorrow that makes no story built but with such meaning could end so abruptly. Her mind replayed the last explanation. The final hug, connection between those who leave and those who stay, smile before a bond that doesn't rely on physical stories begin exactly like this. It's through this connection that the most unexpected revelations arise. But it's in darkness that not as immediate mysticism, when the world inner certainty that defies logic, when exhaustion overtakes the body. All of this, when the soul, unfolding by pain, before opens to something beyond what the eyes can see. Of ordinary life. Stay with me until the end, from outside because eyes. What you're about to discover might astonish you. Already underway. That same night, and as tears finally gave way to exhaustion, it becomes clear that mother some events don't begin when they seem to. Between sleep and sorrow, slowly, something for the right moment to reveal themselves. A dream, not an ordinary one. Not this a makes sense to me, but a dream so now vivid I want to go even be ignored, because it's a right dream here that the story shares tone and but reveals a layer few not truly imagine. But presence. Until now, everything seemed like preparation had chosen to intervene. Movements. Many would call but it real war doesn't announce others its arrival. Would say it's just the brain coping with trauma, and when it does, but those who've experienced everything, spiritual signs plans, know, there are moments that can't be explained, even your sense of time. Felt. The environment where that soldier found himself no longer resembled the controlled soldiers who return from war often carry scars. The air was heavy, bodies and silence was never complete. Some return by tension became no routine. Expected. Every others come back because someone somewhere. Every decision could mean survival. This or vanishing just without a story about war. The mindset it's had about to be reset each spiritual connection because there was no room for distraction, even the boundary between life and death. It was during one such mission deepened, everything began to stir out of control. Silently, what should have been a calculated operation, preparing a revelation in no one could foresee. An unexpected attack. That's exactly why stories like this can't remain explosions. Because as you listen, noise, something inside you might awaken, a buried memory. This is the kind of situation even that strange feeling never convey with full but could never put into words. In war's shadows, if this resonates fear isn't shouted, leave a comment below sharing what touched you most so far. As he'd been trained. Writing is the most sincere way to soothe what's been locked away in your heart. Even as the world crumbled around experiences that but there are moments when war imposes its own brutal logic. People who felt spiritual human effort seemed small against impossible premonitions. It was then when one person became separated, another recognizes themselves. Smoke. That's how this community grows. One story leading to direction, one testimony giving strength as if seconds stretched into your eternity. Participation here is what keeps this channel delivering moving stories like this to those who need to hear them. Too powerful to avoid. At any moment during this flash, you felt a shiver, almost nothing, a pause in your thoughts, or that inexplicable inner silence. Strange sensation. Please consider liking this video, as if his body that simple gesture helps this message reach more people who carry unanswered reinforcements arrive, unresolved grief, the scene or the hope that not everything ends destroyed equipment to blast and if you feel stories like this deserve only by urgent, if accounts of transformed lives, soldiers who return from war, and signs that defy logic should keep being shared, then his name echoed repeatedly. Every subscription is like a signal that this message must keep moving forward. Searches, crossing screens, sight, analysis, and attentive hearts. Reports filled because what began with devastating news point is far from over. Pointed to the and worst. From here on, every detail of that night, no every precise location, and every sign that signs of survival will begin to reveal something far greater than anyone imagined. Seemed inevitable. Now, I want to go to the military. Another soldier lost in combat. A statistic long before any uniform was worn. A casualty recorded clinically. An ordinary young man with simple dreams. The decision was made on the battlefield that had with no room for emotional doubt. War. But what official reports fail to capture is the hidden truth. He was born in a home where the smell of coffee mixed with kitchen table conversation, where his mother's voice was a refuge, and where the future seemed distant but something remained unresolved. He grew up learning that life demanded choices amid the wreckage. Easy, others far less didn't quite fit. From early on, the body carried a sense of responsibility. The signs were confusing. To be someone the environment had been too altered by the blast. But still, from an inner the situation demanded a people like this answer. Often feel or they doesn't must go wait. Beyond it comfort, moves on as if something inside tells them standing still isn't and so, an option. Officially, when the decision to enlist was declared dead, it wasn't born meanwhile, from an empty far impulse. Away. Life followed many conversations had happened. Sleepless nights, people walked the streets he never fully voiced. At night. To his mother, cooked meals. That choice felt unaware like a mix that of somewhere in the world, a story was being her son choose interrupted. Fear
War's
knowing
true
some journeys
impact is
exact
only
too
felt
high
when
when
that
information
Still,
crosses borders
she
and strikes the
him,
most sensitive
because
place
mothers
possible,
sense when they
the
must
heart
let
of one
go,
who loves,
even with their
for the
hearts
soldier,
clenched
however,
tight.
the
Before
experience
the war,
didn't end
he
in that
spoke
moment.
of the future.
Between
He
lapses
talked
of
about
consciousness
returning,
and silence,
he dreamed
something
of building
inside
something
him kept
once
fighting
it was
to stay.
all over.
An
He made
inexplicable
simple
promises,
promises,
as
yet
if an
deeply
invisible
meaningful
thread
ones,
pulled him
to
back.
call whenever he could,
Many who
to
endure
take care of
extreme
himself,
situations
to make
describe
sure
this
this wasn't
sensation,
a final
a
goodbye.
state between
And
presence
perhaps
and
the strongest
absence,
promise
where
was
the
the
line
one
between
spoken
life
without
and death
words
seems to blur.
during their last
This
embrace,
is a delicate
when
part of
time
the
seemed
journey,
to slow
where
down
logic
just for the two of
fails
them.
and perception
That final
shifts,
hug
where
wasn't
transformation
ordinary.
begins
It
quietly,
was long,
not
silent,
as an instant
filled
miracle,
with everything
but as
they
an
couldn't
inner
say.
process that
The
defies
kind of
simple
hug that stays
explanations,
etched in memory,
War had
as
marked
both a
his
warning
body and an
but
anchor.
something deeper
She
was
felt
being
it.
touched.
He felt
And while
it,
the world
but
registered
neither
a loss,
dared translate
something behind
that
the
premonition
scenes came
into
to
moving.
words.
Decisions
Sometimes
were being made
love
in distant
expresses
places
itself
by people who
precisely
didn't
through
yet
silence.
know they were part of the
That
same
day,
story.
the soldier
The
walked
ripple
out
of that
the door
attack
carrying a
wouldn't stay
backpack
confined
and
to
a
the
lifetime
battlefield.
of
It
expectations.
would cross continents.
He didn't
dreams,
know what lay
and
ahead,
certainties,
but believed he
because
was ready.
sometimes it's
And
precisely
in a way,
when
he
everything
was.
seems to go wrong
He
that
had
the journey
values,
enters its most
discipline,
decisive
faith.
phase.
Even
A
if it
phase
was a
where not
quiet
everything
faith,
is visible,
tucked away
not everything
in the
is
corners of his
communicated,
mind.
and where
But
truth
war
quietly
doesn't
prepares
test
to
only
reveal
the
itself
body.
in the most
It
unexpected
confronts
way.
the hidden truth
Right below,
each person
I'm on
carries
this
about
journey
themselves.
too. Far from home, amid drills and deployments, he began to grasp the real weight of his decisions. Now I want to go even deeper, because what follows the official notification isn't absolute silence, but an internal noise no one else can hear. When the news arrived, that mother listened carefully. Every word registered, every explanation seemed too clear to question. Dates, times, protocols, technical terms. Everything felt too orderly for something that, inside her, felt completely out of place. Grief began even before emotional confirmation, a strange, anticipatory mourning with no body, no farewell, no ritual to help the mind accept the loss. She tried to do what was expected: inform relatives, take deep breaths, keep composure. But there was a different kind of emptiness. Not just pain, but a persistent sense of incompleteness, as if a crucial piece of the story had been left out. In the days that followed, the house felt larger and colder. Simple objects gained weight: a forgotten glass in the sink, an old photograph, a piece of clothing still holding his scent. Each detail became a silent trigger. Yet something still didn't add up. Her mind accepted the information, but her heart resisted, not out of denial, but perception. She'd wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, without knowing why. Not clear nightmares, just constant restlessness. An alertness that never switched off. Her mindset began shifting without her noticing. Instead of just suffering, she started observing. Instead of just crying, she began feeling, and what she felt didn't match the idea of a final end. Some might call it hope. Others, illusion. But those who've experienced something similar know there's a subtle difference between denying reality and perceiving a hidden truth. She wasn't saying the pain wasn't real. It was deep, exhausting, undeniable. What didn't feel real was the final conclusion she'd been handed. Days passed, and unanswered questions mounted. Why no concrete details? Why no visual confirmation? Why did that chest-tightening sensation always strike at the same hours? Small signs began repeating, not spectacularly, but persistently. Too many coincidences to ignore, too subtle to prove. She tried to rationalize. Told herself it was emotional fallout, her brain seeking comfort. But in moments of absolute silence, when no one was watching, she felt something different. Not a voice, not a clear image. Just a formless certainty. A premonition that didn't shout, but simply remained. The grieving process usually follows predictable stages, but here something slipped through the script. There was no full acceptance, no total anger, just suspension, as if life were on pause, awaiting a revelation with no set date. This silent waiting is among the hardest phases because it allows neither rest nor resolution. Meanwhile, those around her offered ready-made phrases. He's at peace. You must be strong now. Time will heal. Well-meaning words that, in that moment, rang hollow. Because what she felt wasn't just emotional, it was existential. Something inside insisted the story was still unfolding, even as the world insisted on a period at the end. Behind this pain, a transformation began. She started trusting her own perception more, paying attention to details she'd once overlooked, honoring her intuition with respect instead of fear. This inner shift didn't bring immediate comfort, but preparation, as if something greater were being organized beyond sight. Her refusal to accept the loss wasn't born of desperation, it was a quiet decision not to abandon what she sensed was true. And such decisions carry consequences. They demand courage, patience, and often, solitude, because not everyone understands when someone chooses to listen to the inexplicable. There were moments she nearly gave in, considered simply accepting and moving on as others expected. But something always pulled her back to that starting point, a recurring thought, a physical sensation, a sudden weight in her chest. That impact didn't paralyze her, it kept her alert. It's in this state that many revelations begin, not abruptly, but gradually, like puzzle pieces appearing when one is ready to see them. Truth rarely forces itself. It whispers, waiting to be recognized. And as this mother lived a grief that defied definition, something on the other side of the world was also stirring. Two parallel journeys, linked by something invisible, advancing toward a point still unclear. The feeling that nothing had truly ended was slowly taking clearer shape. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper, because it's on this night that something shifts inside that mother. It wasn't an ordinary night. Her body was exhausted, her eyes stung from crying, but sleep didn't come as rest. It came heavy, weighed down by relentless thoughts. Her mind replayed the official notice, but her heart insisted on moving in the opposite direction. There was a strange emptiness, not the void of permanent absence, but one that felt incomplete, as if a crucial piece remained missing. When she finally drifted off, it wasn't deep sleep. It was that delicate state between wakefulness and rest, where the mind lowers its guard and something more sensitive takes over. And there, in that silent space, the dream began. Not confusing, not fragmented, a dream unlike any she'd had before. Too vivid to ignore. Too present to be dismissed as imagination. In the dream, her son appeared as she remembered him. No distortions, no shadows. His face was clear, his gaze steady, his body whole. Every detail was so sharp it caused an almost physical impact. The clothes he wore, the way he approached, even his breathing seemed real. It wasn't a memory from the past, it was presence. And that made all the difference. He didn't speak of death. There was no farewell. No sadness. There was urgency, but also calm, as if he knew something she didn't yet know, as if he'd come to realign something that had gone off track. The message was simple, direct, impossible to mistake. He was alive. And she needed to believe it, even when everything around her said otherwise. This is the part that defies logic. Dreams are usually metaphors, mixes of memory and emotion. But this one had no symbolic language. It had intention. Clarity. He mentioned details she hadn't heard from anyone. Places, situations, specific sensations. Information not hidden in the recesses of her mind, but seemingly from elsewhere. When she woke, the impact was immediate. Heart racing, breath short, her whole body reacting as if she'd lived something real. For a few seconds, she couldn't tell if she'd awakened or been pulled back into a reality less true than the dream itself. And in that instant, a silent decision began to form. She tried to rationalize it. Told herself it was just wishful thinking, anticipatory grief creating images to ease the pain. But the more she tried to fit the dream into common explanations, the more it eluded them. Something about it resisted being labeled mere emotion. A hidden truth pulsed behind that experience. The next day, small details began aligning, recurring sensations, insistent thoughts, an inner calling that wouldn't quiet. It wasn't desperation, it was conviction. Her mindset shifted from passive acceptance to alertness, as if that night had awakened something dormant. Mothers often say they sense when something happens to their children, but few speak of what happens when that feeling isn't a warning, but a confirmation. From that dream onward, the pain didn't vanish, but it changed form. Instead of paralyzing her, it propelled her. Instead of silencing her, it sparked movement. Now I want to go even deeper, every word because what follows the official notification isn't previously accepted without but an internal noise no one else can hear. When the news arrived, that mother listened carefully. Every word registered, add up. Every explanation the story had seemed too clear, and those gaps began troubling her more than the fear of being wrong. Protocols. That night marked a turning point. Not because it delivered too final answers, something that, but because it changed her starting point. Completely out of place. She'd been reacting to even before emotional confirmation. She began acting from anticipatory mourning with no body, the dream wasn't no farewell, ending, no ritual to help the mind accept a silent nudge that she tried to do what was expected, everything that followed. Inform relatives, and perhaps the most striking part is this: keep composure. While the world continued treating the story as closed, something invisible kept moving. A persistent sense of incompleteness rarely happened, as if a crucial piece of the story had been left out. First, as in the days that followed, the house felt larger and colder. Finally, simple objects gained weight. That night, a forgotten glass in the sink, peace, an old photograph, restlessness, a piece of clothing, but it was a different kind of restlessness. Each detail became a silent trigger, as if life were asking her not to settle for the official version. Her mind accepted as if more were unfolding behind the scenes than any report could show, but perception. And it's from this point that the story deepens into unexpected paths, racing, where simple decisions gain weight, not and small actions begin to have impacts no one could foresee. An alertness that never switched off. This makes sense to me. Her mindset now I want to go even deeper, without her noticing. Because after that night, instead of nothing was ordinary for that mother again. Observing. The dream instead of just locked away, she began feeling image, and what she felt didn't match the idea of a final end. Some might call it hope. It walked through the house alongside her thoughts. But those who've experienced something similar know there's a subtle difference between denying reality and perceiving a hidden truth by proof. She wasn't saying the pain wasn't real. It was deep, exhausting. She tried to rationalize it. What didn't feel real, it was just emotional fallout. She'd been her mind seeking comfort amid anticipatory grief. Questions mounted. There were too many concrete details in the dream. Her son didn't appear distant or confused. Why did that chest-tightening sensation wearing the same serious expression he used when he had something important began repeating? His clothes were specific, but persistently. His tone was calm. Too many coincidences and above all, to ignore. There was a direct, almost firm message impossible to rationalize. When she opened her eyes, it was emotional fallout, not brain seeking comfort. As if in moments of absolute silence, the clock showed an unusual time. She felt one that repeated without logical explanation. Not a clear. She got up, walked to the kitchen, drank water, tried to follow her usual morning routine, but her body was there. The grieving process usually follows predictable stages, but here something slipped through the script. There was no full acceptance, began appearing, no total anger, subtle, just suspension, as if life were on pause, grand events, awaiting a revelation with no set date. Just small interruptions is among the hardest phases, the same number showing up in unrelated places nor resolution. A song playing precisely when she thought of those around her offered ready-made reappearance in an unlikely spot. Individually, they could be dismissed as coincidence. Will heal. Together, well-meaning words that, a pattern. In that moment, her mindset shifted. Not because abruptly, what she felt but wasn't just emotional, where there had been only existential. Pain. Now arose something inside kind of attention. The story was she still began observing more, even as the world more closely to her body. At the honoring that inner feeling, insisting the story wasn't complete. Began. It wasn't. She started trusting her own perception more, a perception that a hidden truth lay once overlooked. Honoring her intuition. A few nighs later, instead of dream repeated. This inner shift didn't bring immediate comfort, but preparation. As if something greater were being organized beyond sight. He seemed closer. Her refusal to accept the loss wasn't born of desperation. It was a quiet decision not to abandon what she sensed was true. He didn't such decisions carry consequences. He radiated courage, a calm that starkly contrasted the chaos of the situation. Because not everyone understands like when someone chooses to listen to the inexplicable. Hard to put into words. There were moments she nearly gave in. The mother began to realize she wasn't just grieving and moving on. She was journeying. Expected. A silent, but something always lonely journey that where every sensation a recurring had to be interpreted with physical sensation. She knew that sudden weight in her chest might lead others to doubt her. That impact didn't paralyze her. She kept it all inside. It's in this state that many revelations begin, not abruptly, but the signs continue, like puzzle pieces appearing when one is ready to see them. Chills, truth, a certainty appearing from nowhere and settling with force, waiting to be recognized. It was a mix of hope and responsibility, grief that as if the information received something on the other side of the world was also as if it wasn't just about parallel journeys, but deciding by something invisible. Many would call advancing toward emotional still unclear. Others feeling that nothing had truly ended. Some would say it's the subconscious trying to survive below. This but those who've lived something similar know now there I want to go even deeper don't fit because it's on this night that something shifts. They don't ask for immediate understanding. It wasn't only ordinary night, and that's her body was exhausted. Her eyes stung from crying, but sleep didn't come as rest. Despair gave way weighed down by relentless thoughts. Passivity became her mind replayed alertness. The official notice. She didn't but her heart know insisted on moving in the opposite direction. She couldn't ignore there was a strange emptiness. Something was being built permanent absence, layer by layer, but one that felt from the world's eyes, as if a crucial piece remained. Of these signs wasn't just in their content, drifted off, but in their effect. Deep sleep. They kept the bond that delicate state between wakefulness and rest, where the mind lowers its guard and something more sensitive possibility still existed in that. And in that space, hope wasn't fantasy. It was a silent force, not sustained by repeated experiences too consistent to dismiss, too vivid to ignore. The world kept too present everything as resolved, as imagination. Documents in the dream. Deadlines. Her son appeared as she remembered him. No distortions, no shadows. Decisions. His face was clear. His gaze resisted finality. His body whole, not out of every rebellion, detail was so sharp it caused an almost physical impact. She felt didn't match he wore, the truth, the way he approached, and even when that breathing seemed real. Conflict arises. It wasn't a memory from the past. Only courage can. This phase of the story isn't about answers. He didn't. It's about preparation. About how, no before great revelation, no sadness, life often sends subtle signs to adjust but mindset, also calm, strengthen emotion, something she didn't yet know, as if he'd come to realign something that had gone off track. Every detail the message served an invisible function, impossible to mistake for something greater. He was alive, and as these she signs needed to believe it. Even when mother began to understand said she might not just be a spectator. This is the part that defies logic. Perhaps there was a role to play. Are usually a decision that sooner or later memory would need to be made based on the silent experience that was changing everything inside. It had intention. Right below, clarity. This makes sense to me. He mentioned details. Now I want to go even deeper. Because here, the story shifts specific from pain to decision. Information after the dream, not hidden in nothing was ordinary for that but mother again from elsewhere. The day dawned the same. When she woke, streets unchanged. Impact was immediate. People in their routines, heart racing, but inside breath her, short, something had her whole changed body irreversibly, as if she'd lived something real. It wasn't euphoria or blind denial. She couldn't tell if she'd awakened or been pulled back into a reality less true than the dream itself. Place where certainty and in that instant, a silent decision. She tried convincing herself. She tried to rationalize accumulated longing. Told herself it was just wishful thinking. But the more she rationalized, the stronger the feeling grew to ease the pain. Her son's image in the dream she tried to fit the dream like ordinary dreams. The more it eluded them. It stayed something about it filled with details that clashed with the idea of death. A hidden truth expression behind that experience. That strange serenity amid chaos. Small details began aligning. Feel like a farewell. Recurring sensations. It felt like a plea. Thoughts throughout the day. Calling that subtle signs kept appearing. It wasn't almost like silent confirmation. It was conviction. Repeating her mindset shifted from passive acceptance playing to randomly, as if that object had awakened something dormant. Screamed, mothers often say they sense everything aligned happens to their children to ignore, but few speak of what happens when that feeling isn't a warning, where there had been only confirmation and anticipatory from that dream onward. Now arose movement, didn't vanish, an unrest but it that no longer allowed stillness. Instead of paralyzing her, it propelled her. Instead of silencing her, it sparked movement. She decided to act, though she didn't know exactly how. She called numbers she wasn't sure still worked, asked uncomfortable questions, insisted on clearer answers. On the other end, she met protocols, canned responses, voices trained to end conversations quickly. They said there was no news, that everything possible had been done. Institutional silence. Closure of possibilities. But something inside her refused to accept that version as final, not out of rebellion, but internal coherence. If there was a hidden truth in this story, it needed to surface. Persistence became her language. Each call was an attempt. Each question, an opening. Each refusal, a push to try another path. This decision wasn't easy. Questioning authorities takes courage, especially when emotionally fragile. But this wasn't just about pain anymore, it was about responsibility. The feeling that giving up would mean abandoning not only her son but also what the dream had revealed. Behind this journey, the mother faced her own fear of seeming deluded, exaggerated, or out of touch with reality. She heard advice to rest, to accept, to let time do its work. But time, in that moment, felt like a dangerous luxury. Each unanswered day deepened the sense that something was slipping away. And so, driven by a conviction that defied words, she kept going. At some point, someone on the other end hesitated, a longer pause than usual, a less automatic reply, a detail missing from official reports. Small cracks began appearing, nearly invisible, yet enough to reignite hope. Not naive hope, but the kind born when firm decisions meet possible paths. This phase reveals something vital about transformation. It doesn't always come spectacularly. Sometimes it's built through repeated phone calls, sleepless nights, persistent questions. This mother's journey wasn't just about external answers, it was also an internal process of strengthening. Each action reinforced her certainty that she hadn't been wrong to feel what she felt. Meanwhile, far away, the soldier's situation remained uncertain. The pieces weren't officially connected yet, but they were moving in parallel. Decisions made on one side began, unbeknownst to anyone, affecting events on the other. This is how many revelations begin, not with announcements, but with tiny fractures in what seemed definitive. Most strikingly, this courage didn't come from the absence of fear, but from living alongside it. The mother felt fear constantly, but chose not to let it dictate her actions. Persistence became her silent prayer, her way of keeping the bond alive even when everything pointed otherwise. And the more she advanced, the more the story resisted simple closure, as if something waited for the right moment to reveal itself. The feeling was that her initial decision, made after the dream, had set in motion a sequence of events that could no longer be stopped. Nothing was clear yet. Nothing resolved. But one thing was evident. The silence had been broken. And when silence breaks, truth begins finding space to emerge, even if it takes time to fully appear. Right below, persistence changes destinies. Now I want to go even deeper, because it's right here that reality starts cracking from within, revealing something no one was prepared to see. That mother's persistence, dismissed by many as stubbornness, began producing silent movements behind the scenes. It wasn't an instant miracle. It was a sequence of small decisions, repeated calls, noted names, cross-checked times, revisited reports. Truth rarely appears all at once, it approaches gradually, testing whether it can be borne. As days passed, previously overlooked details gained weight. A forgotten note in a report. A mismatched timestamp. A vaguely recorded movement. What had been declared closed now demanded review, not from emotion, but from coherence. And when logic conflicts with silence, something must be reassessed. In corridors where decisions are made far from families, that soldier's name began circulating again, not as hope, but as doubt. And doubt, once it takes root, is powerful. It forces second looks, questions certainties, admits that the official version might not tell the whole story. War creates many blind spots, and that's where hidden truths often hide. A new sweep was authorized, quietly, discreetly. The kind of operation launched when no one wants to raise expectations. Teams were sent to areas previously deemed inaccessible, harsh terrain scarred by the attack. Places where logic said no one could survive long. But war's logic doesn't always grasp the strength of those who refuse to quit. And there, under extreme conditions, something unexpected happened. Faint signs began to appear, nearly imperceptible marks, hints of movement, traces that didn't belong to the original scene. Each discovery heightened tension and narrowed the space for skepticism. The impossible began seeming improbable, and the improbable, slowly became possible. When they finally found him, there was no immediate celebration, only silence. A heavy, disbelieving silence. The soldier was alive. Injured, exhausted, dehydrated, but alive. Against all projections. Against all statistics. Against the ending already delivered. Reality had to be confirmed repeatedly, as if minds needed time to accept what eyes were seeing. He'd survived in ways that defied simple explanation. In critical condition, sustained by a force seeming to come from beyond the body. The journey that began on the battlefield had crossed invisible boundaries. The impact of this discovery rippled quickly among those involved, but remained contained. The information needed careful handling. Mistakes had to be acknowledged. Truths had to be reorganized. Yet the most astonishing part wasn't just that he was alive, it was the details. exactly as in the dream. His position when found, the nature of his injuries, the estimated timeline, information no one had disclosed, coincidence to some, connection to others. To that mother, it was confirmation of something she'd always known, without proof. This revelation brought not just relief, but profound transformation, a mindset shift forcing everyone to re-examine their certainties. What is real when experience transcends logic? How far does intuition reach? When does the invisible interfere with the visible? These questions don't fit in reports, they echo within those who live the story. As medical procedures began and the soldier's body fought to stabilize, something greater unfolded in the emotional backstage of this narrative. A family that had begun mourning had to abruptly halt it. Pain gave way to shock. Shock to contained hope. And hope to an even more intense waiting. Nothing returned to normal in that instant. There's no simple return after a revelation like this. There's a clear before and after. The journey doesn't end when someone is found, it merely changes form. New challenges arise. New truths must be faced. And the meaning of it all slowly reveals itself. Because when someone returns from what seemed definitive, they don't come back unchanged. They carry marks, questions, and a different sensitivity to life. And when a mother realizes her persistence altered an entire story's course, something inside her reorganizes too. The experience stops being merely personal. It gains an impact that reaches others. This moment doesn't close anything. It opens. It creates space for deeper revelations, encounters yet to happen, answers not yet ready. The line between loss and reunion has been crossed, but what follows demands even greater courage to understand. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper, because here, the story shifts from mere survival to transformation. The reunion doesn't unfold like perfect, imagined scenes. It arrives heavy with silence, disbelief, and a strange time lag as the heart races to catch up with reality before the mind does. When the mother received confirmation her son was alive, there was no instant celebration, only a different kind of shock, nearly paralyzing, as if her body needed to relearn how to breathe. The reunion moment is marked by details never included in official reports. The plane setting, the hospital smell, the low hum of machines, the cold light falling on a face marked by extreme exhaustion. The soldier was there, alive, yet transformed. Not just physically. Something in his eyes betrayed a journey beyond rational explanation. And when his mother saw him, time seemed to fold in on itself, bringing back that final pre-departure embrace, now reinterpreted. They approached slowly, as if a sudden move might shatter this newly discovered reality. No words came at first. Only hands touching, confirming what the dream had already announced: life, presence, truth. Faith, which until then walked between doubt and insistence, now took concrete form in that moment. Not as a sermon, but as lived experience. The soldier, still weak, began sharing fragments of what he'd endured. He spoke slowly, choosing words carefully, as if trying to translate something that didn't fully fit common language. He described moments when he lost track of time, unsure if he was awake or unconscious. He said there were times he felt he wasn't alone, even when everything suggested abandonment. That perception carried him through critical moments, like a silent presence sustaining his will to survive. Hearing this, the mother immediately recalled the dream, the exact details, the tone of voice, the message he'd delivered while she slept. The connection was impossible to ignore. This was no longer coincidence. It was a hidden truth slowly revealing itself, stitching together experiences that happened in different places but belonged to the same journey. This reunion didn't erase the war or its marks. On the contrary, it amplified what had been endured. The soldier recognized he'd returned changed. His mindset had shifted. His priorities were no longer the same. What once felt urgent now seemed small. What once went unnoticed now carried deep weight. He'd crossed an invisible boundary between life and death, and returned with questions lacking simple answers. The mother, too, was no longer the same. The persistence that drove her, the courage to question authorities and defy silence, now transformed into broader understanding about decisions rooted in intuition. She realized that listening to that inner voice, even when no one else validates it, can change destinies. Not as a rule, but as real possibility. The reunion brought relief, but also revealed emotional layers that needed facing. Recovery wasn't just physical, it was psychological, spiritual, profound. Both needed to reorganize their story, weaving trauma, fear, and hope into a new life narrative. It wasn't about returning to what was, it was about learning to exist after. As they spoke, it became clear something greater had moved through this story, not as spectacle, but as intimate experience. Something that doesn't seek to convince, only to exist. For those who lived it, doubt vanished. For those who hear it, there's a silent invitation to reflect. How often are signs ignored because they seem too fragile against logic? How many decisions go unmade for fear of seeming insistent? The reunion doesn't end the journey. It launches a new, more complex, more conscious phase. One where every battlefield memory coexists with the certainty that not everything ends when it seems to. And as this story continues, more details emerge. Revelations that deepen understanding of that night, that dream, and everything set in motion since. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper, because when war ends on paper, it remains alive within people. The reunion happened. The embrace existed. Hearts beat in unison for a moment. But the story doesn't end there. In truth, it's at this point that something even greater begins to reveal itself, far from spotlights and immediate celebrations. After all they'd been through, mother and son realized they couldn't return to who they'd been. Something different lingered in their eyes, in how they spoke, in how they felt the world. The experience had left invisible but deep marks, not marks of fear, but of transformation. When someone walks so close to the edge of life and death, their mindset shifts. What once seemed important loses power. What once seemed small gains immense weight. The soldier, now home, spoke little about technical details of his ordeal. Not to hide anything, but because he knew some experiences don't fit simple words. He described sensations, strange perceptions, moments when he felt not alone despite all evidence to the contrary. At critical times, he sensed a silent presence, an internal, almost intuitive guidance. This awareness began precisely when he was declared dead, a hard-to-explain interval where time seemed to lose its familiar flow. He didn't remember everything, just fragments, like flashes. One was the clear sense that he needed to resist. Another was the certainty that someone was interceding for him, though he didn't know who. And when he heard about his mother's dream, something fit together in a disconcerting way. That's when they both understood this story wasn't just about physical survival. A hidden truth had threaded through the entire journey, a connection that hadn't broken with distance, war, or even an official death declaration. For the mother, it confirmed what her heart had always insisted. For the son, it brought new understanding of faith, purpose, and choice. The house, once filled with the silence of anticipatory grief, now held reflective pauses. Not constant euphoria, but something deeper, a silent reverence for life, greater care with words, a new awareness of how each decision impacts not only the one who leaves, but the one who stays. The war had ended, but the inner journey had just begun. Stories like this remind us that not everything is explained by official records. There are invisible backstages at work while we go about our routines unnoticed. Often, we call coincidence what is actually connection. We label intuition what might be a calling. And we ignore signs because they don't fit the logic we've accepted as the only truth. This reunion didn't erase pain, but it gave everything new meaning. Faith stopped being inherited belief and became lived experience. Hope ceased being abstract and became a daily choice. Transformation happened without grand speeches, only through the awareness that life is more complex, profound, and mysterious than it first appears. Perhaps the greatest impact of this story isn't that the soldier survived, but what it revealed to everyone around. How many similar stories exist but go untold? How many mothers felt something they couldn't explain? How many people ignored signs for fear of seeming irrational? Between the visible and the invisible lies a space where many answers hide. When war ends, the world expects everything to return to normal. But those who walk through such experiences know there's no returning to the old, normal. There's only a new way of seeing, a new sensitivity, a broader understanding of one's own journey. And at this point, the story stops being just about one soldier and becomes about all of us. Because, in some way, we've all faced internal battles. We've all felt something didn't add up. We've all ignored or followed a hunch that changed our path. Maybe the difference lies only in how willing we are to recognize those experiences as part of our own transformation. And as this story continues echoing, there remains a silent reflection on how many truths remain unrevealed, how many signs go unnoticed, and how many connections persist beyond what eyes can see. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story spoke to something within you. Not just for its intensity, but for what it reveals about faith, choices, and how some journeys continue even when everything seems finished. This space exists precisely for that, to share stories that touch, provoke reflection, and leave silent marks, the kind we carry for life. If this content resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. That way, whenever a new story like this emerges, you'll be here, following accounts of transformation, hope, and what often happens beyond sight but never beyond the heart. Also leave a comment saying you made it to the end. It can be something simple like, "This message was for me," or "I'm with you to the end." Sometimes, a short phrase says a lot, and helps build connection among people having similar reflections. And if at any point in this story you felt you weren't just watching, but participating, please leave a like on the video. That small gesture shows the conversation was worthwhile and strengthens the path we're building together here. Oh, and before you go, check out the video that appears next to this one. It complements this topic perfectly and deepens the reflection on what exists between the visible and the invisible. Click there and continue with me.